Chapter 18, Day 8. MIZ was out before dawn. I awoke starving. The idea of raw fish and berries didn't excite me. Today I decided was fire day. The idea of roasted meat made me salivate crazily and motivated me to get serious about figuring out how to make a fire. Okay, I admit it, I was a Boy Scout. Not much of one, though. I dropped out of our Baptist church troop right after I got my star badge. I remember disappointment when I learned there were no merit badges for sling throwing. Unfortunately, the merit badges I did earn, digital technology, chemistry, electricity, drafting, game design, and electronics, didn't make me a practice fire starter. My dad once gave me a flint and steel kit when I graduated from Cub Scouts, which I lost without ever starting a single fire with them. I thought about the guys spearing the giant boar. They had fire, I knew it, but even finding them might be tough. They were surely on the move. I knew vaguely that agriculture, thus villages, was way off in the misty future, so the troop of humans must be on the move most of the time. Even if I found them, what? Just walk up and say, "Got a light?" Later, I'd meet some of the locals. Right now, I had to make a fire on my own. That there were humans here at all was a huge curiosity to me. None of my favorite science sources ever hinted about people in America back in the last interglacial. Cubby was getting restless and worked on her three-legged walking technique around the cave. I watched her nervously. All those rocks. If she re-injured that leg, it'd be dicey trying to reset it. It would hurt much worse than the first time. I couldn't stand that. Well, I could, but damn, I was really growing to like that round-eared kitty. Sort of halfway between how I feel about a great dog and a good kid. I'm not sure how she feels about me, but I know she respects my throwing arm and how I handle a sling. So I took her on a walk, she moving nearby as I walked through undergrowth and big trees, me on uber alert with my sling loaded to chase off anything that fancied a wounded lion for brunch. I carried my fish spear over my shoulder with a new cord, too. It was a beautiful morning. The sun slanted just barely above parallel to the ground when it snuck through the trees. Mostly it was dark in that dawny way, with a sky up between the treetops that was as blue and transparent as a newly cleaned Olympic swimming pool. I felt a curlicue of curiosity from Cubby as she registered that future image. Swimming pool. I was pleased I even noticed the beauty. I was on a mission, 2 actually. When on missions, I frequently miss the ambience thing. Mission 1 was to protect Cubby. Being disabled is a classic invitation to lazy predators, and most all predators prefer the less challenging meal. Mission 2 was fire. I had to engage my engineer sensors in their target of opportunity mode to get me closer to making a fire. Roast meat. My search list was kindling, fuel, and ignition maker. I had no idea what in this moist forest might meet those needs, so I started sector sweeps with my eyes, time-sharing the search with frequent confirmation pings off Cubby. I'm a master multitasker, if I haven't mentioned that so far. Looking under bushes, up and down tree trunks, at the end of low-hanging limbs, I tell myself this is double-duty procedure. These intense, detailed, specific attentions to the woods would surely catch a bad guy bunching up his muscles to jump on Cubby. There, hanging on that big branch coming out low on that trunk, a cluster of silver-gray moss, probably the nearest thing to dry grass I'll find without going clear out to the savannah. I said, "Hold up," to Cubby. She sort of understood what I meant. She slowed down a little bit. "Stop. Wait," I clarified, and started pulling off tufts of the moss. It felt pretty dry. A little more drying and probably catch fire easily. Kindling in the bag. Which would I find next, ignition or fuel? A cold sensation hit me. Hard. Sensation's a bit weak. It was a blue ice stab in my gut from Cubby. Full power psychic gasp. A fear gasp with a sharp overlay of startled. The mental picture had a lot of noise in it, but I got my mind around 2 really big wolves. like right out of the big-headed dog monster stories. Dire wolves. Nature Channel, I think. Cubby was at the center of their attention, and they were warming up big mouthfuls of teeth with flecks of wolf spit and full lip retraction. Disney monsters. Like the hyenas we had seen earlier, except way bigger and twice as mean-looking. I dropped the moss and ran full out around the trees that separated me from Cubby. Out came my sling, and I started the first whirl, almost before I thought about it. I should have thought about it. The stone slipped out on the first shaky whirl, zipping at medium speed by the ear of the bigger wolf. Fear in rushing brings the bollocks out. The whirring pass of the stone broke one of the beast's non-stop snarl for a second, but it was back in another second. I felt my legs shake. It's way different trying to sling a rock at a fast-moving killer animal that's after your favorite lion cub than it is to hit a harmless, unmoving tree trunk. So I screamed and waved my arms wildly for a second before starting the reload. Maybe because it was so out of their experience, the two beasties paused in their about-to-leap position and looked at me, 6 or 7 meters away. Gave me time to load another stone and wind up more carefully this time. Cubby backed slowly toward me. I side-armed and flung. It felt good, but the shadows were so crisscrossed under the trees I couldn't actually see the stone fly. The thunk and kind of snap was louder than you'd expect hitting a furry animal would be, and the action that followed was completely unexpected. The mega-wolf that was my target shot straight up in the air, more than a meter, like it had been catapulted by a landmine. On the way up, a stream of blood shot out, seemingly from its nose. It was like slow-mo to my speeding mind. Up goes the wolf, out comes the blood, down falls the beast into a pile of convulsing muscles. This had to be the slingshot of the century, until David, of course, to have this kind of effect on a large, powerful animal. The second beast seemed confused by its partner's actions. It tore its red eyes from Cubby and backed away from the jerking pile of ex-partner, snarling defensively as if it was a new threat. I managed to get another stone loaded and let fly at the distracted wolf. This time I saw the stone, right into the haunch of number 2, a way quieter hit. The struck animal let out a fair shriek, limping badly on its right rear leg. Cubby had scooted all the way back to me and squeezed between my legs, pulses of victory and waves of gratitude filling the psychic space between us. Breathing like a power lifter, I unstraddled Cubby and sank to my knees by her side, wrapping my left arm around her neck, breathing now like a sprinter. "Whew, shit," I managed. The unlikelihood, the luck, and the spectacular outcome of that shot washed over me. Bubbling up out of my stressed mind came a clear memory from my church-going childhood. Our preacher's southern patrician voice, clear as a digital recording, wreathed in the fine acoustics of our church. "And it came to pass, when the Philistine arose and came and drew nigh to meet David, and David hasted and ran toward the army to meet the Philistine. And David put his hand in his bag, and took thence a stone, and slang it, and smote the Philistine on his forehead. And the stone sunk into his forehead, and he fell upon his face to the earth." I slowly leaned over to the ground, cloaked in vertigo. From hyperventilating, I figured. Might explain the almost hallucinatory King James memory, too. Cubby put her whiskered nose tight on mine, as though sampling my breath for life or in supportive sympathy. I got a quick flash of reassurance. The big beasts are gone. We're safe. Then a spotty replay of the preacher. Cubby had heard my memory. It was clear she couldn't make sense of it, but she had heard it. When I pulled it back together and stood up on wobbly legs, Cubby hobbled over to the dead wolf and sniffed around. I took my fish spear and poked uncertainly at it. Like a pile of bones wrapped in scabby hair, the animal could have been dropped from 50 meters and crushed into this strange, lumpy agglomeration of body parts. Placing the spear under its head, I pushed it over on its back, at least the part I could move. One heavy critter. Then I could see what the super luck shot had done. Front left fangs, top and bottom, sheared off. I levered the jaws open and looked into the blood-filled mouth. Big damn mouth. With another stick, I pushed aside the tongue and scraped away the coagulating blood. There was a clear rip in the back of its throat. Moving the head to catch the light, I pushed my spear point into the tear. It went clear to the back of the head, and I felt my stone embedded in something that held it fairly firmly. Only the bizarreness of it kept me from trying an autopsy right then and there to confirm my theory that the stone had penetrated soft tissue until it hit the top of the hyena's spine, where it joins the skull, crushing the top of the spinal cord or the base of the brain. Nothing less would have caused what happened, that convulsive leap and the complete collapse and sudden death. People who win big lotteries must feel the way I felt. Impossible, but it happened. Even with all the action, the morning was still young. I'd say 10:50 Central Standard Time. Just guessing. We took a few minutes sitting by the dead wolf, recovering. "I'm going to keep looking for fire-starting materials." I envisioned me with a straight stick between my palms, twirling the stick in the socket of a larger dry stick, the contact point piled over with dried tree moss and tiny twigs. "And if I come to a creek in my search, I'll spear a fish, which I will eat because I'm freaking starving." The spontaneous visualization made my mouth water, predictable. Maybe Cubby gets a sensory blast. Then, from Cubby came her first word. It was, "Yes." "You little rascal," I said, grinning. "You're some kind of feline prodigy, kid," I said. Then, "Have you ever had fish?" I pictured her crunching into a spotted whatever. I'm not sure she understood the question. Hard to visualize a question. I think her mouth watered, though. "If the fish is big enough, I'm going to make some needles from its bones," I said, moving my hands like I was sewing. Not that that would mean squat to the cub. "You need more exercise, at least 2 or 3 hours more walking. But we saw what can happen if we get separated." Engineer mind kicks in. "So, you walk around me in circles while I look for fire stuff. Keep me in sight. If you see any predator or other danger, tell me that second." I said it to her like I was a patrol leader to a Boy Scout. Just to make sure she got it, I said it all again, visualizing her circling me while we walked. I got a quiet nonverbal back from her, very much like, okay, I got it already." We started toward where the residual lion GPS in my head indicated was the shortest route to the creek, Cubby orbiting around me like a fuzzy moon. We stopped at a small berry thicket. I picked and ate at the ravenous setting. I could see the stains running down my chest. I imagined what my face and chin looked like. Cubby eventually tried a berry out of juvenile curiosity. She spit it out immediately, and, I swear, looked at me like I was nuts. Long story short, we got to the creek in less than an hour, and there were several large spotteds, plus a big new surprise, a granddaddy catfish. I've been expecting one of those ever since I saw the creek. Primeval fish, perfectly cast in this prehistoric time, no? It was almost too easy to spear. I kneeled quietly on the ledge of sandstone bordering the creek, still as a mouse for 4 1/4 minutes, more or less, until that big, flat-headed catfish swam along the ledge in its repetitive circling of the pool like a captive in an aquarium. Both hands on the spear, I waited until it was right under me. Then smash, right behind the gills. Easy, killed it for sure. Only that catfish didn't seem to acknowledge that and became a guided mussel, one powerful, primitive, swimming survival specialist. It for sure didn't know it was dead because it shot upstream. I should be used to this by now, but it damn near sprained my wrist pulling the spear out of my hands. Nothing is easy in this time. Except the instances when serendipity smiles, I reminded myself. No question, it was good that I found a huge catfish. No complaining, Streeter. Eventually, of course, the poor thing weakened and I wrestled it out of the water, where I quickly sent it to catfish heaven with a cutting stone to the top of the spine. "Look at that monster," I said to Cubby. She was more cautious than excited about the catch. She crouched 2 meters away and stared carefully at the dying catfish, still whipping its tail, escape reflexes and flexing its sharp fighting spines. Needles, I thought. Cut them off and dry them, sharp as needles. Why not become needles for Mr. Streeter? I said, looking at the wicked fish shanks. After the catfish triumph, I belly-flopped into the creek pool and did the sand-washing exercise on everywhere I expected there was a berry stain. Again, Cubby watched with bemusement, or so I assumed. She was diplomatically silent. When I was scrubbed and feeling mightily refreshed, I set to carving up the catfish. Cubby became considerably more interested at this point, creeping up on the dead but still scary thing and sniffing at the parts I discarded. I was dressing out the big guy. When I tossed out the bladder, Cubby decided catfish were okay, and grabbed the thing like a kitten grabs a toy mouse. She almost fell over, standing on one rear leg. "Wait till you try some fillets," I said, as Cubby gnawed at the bladder. My first bite of meat was a surprise, clearly different from my usual diet of speckled whatever, richer in a sense and sort of muddy. I remembered catfish are bottom feeders, and heaven knows what's on this prehistoric bottom. Certainly not much human crapola, as opposed to the good old 21st century CE. I glanced at the creek and decided nothing bad could be on that pebbled bottom. Maybe fish poop, but clean fish poop. Unless there's an active volcano near here, probably not much, say, mercury either. As predicted, Cubby enjoyed the fillets. After mother's milk and red meat of several varieties, it was the third food group in her young life. I filled up what room was left in my belly after the berry binge, and salvaged the rest of the meat, the shanks, and several bones that, when dried, would be good needle candidates. Look out, moccasin toes. "Be calm. I'm near," came a head-rattling blast from the psychic sphere. Both I and Cubby froze in our current positions, me wrapping catfish parts in a big leaf and Cubby chewing a fish fillet.